No nanny ever lasted with the Millionaire's 6 twins, until a poor cleaning lady did the impossible. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the estate like a gunshot, startling everyone. Another nanny had just quit. Sophie Bennett stood in the grand kitchen, her hands still dusted with flour, quietly watching through the window as the middle-aged woman rushed through the gates, suitcase in hand, like she was fleeing from a nightmare. "That's the 12th one," Mrs. Evelyn, the longtime housekeeper, muttered under her breath. Daniel Whitmore, owner of the estate, and a man trying to be both father and mother to his 6 young children, watched silently from his office upstairs. Ever since his wife, Natalie, passed away shortly after giving birth to sextuplets, Daniel's life had unraveled into a blur of sleepless nights and endless responsibility. Once a brilliant tech entrepreneur gracing the cover of Forbes, he now would have traded all his accolades for just one quiet morning without someone quitting or one of the kids screaming uncontrollably. The historic mansion in Charleston's elite district, once a symbol of power and elegance, now felt more like a gilded cage trapping a man on the edge of burnout. Down in the kitchen, Sophie quietly wiped her hands on her apron, eyes following the familiar scene she had watched repeat over and over for the past months. She had once dreamed of becoming a teacher. Her parents, humble workers from North Charleston, had sacrificed for years so she could attend college. But that dream shattered the day her father was injured in an accident. Sophie dropped out, becoming the family's sole breadwinner. Now she was just a housekeeper, quiet, invisible, in a house where children cried more than they laughed, and the adults were simply trying to survive. But even from the background, Sophie noticed everything. She listened, she observed, and she understood far more than anyone gave her credit for. And today, as that front door slammed shut once again, something inside Sophie shifted. The late afternoon sun filtered through the stained glass windows, casting warm light on the aged tile floors of the grand hallway. From the kitchen, Sophie could hear voices echoing through the estate's intercom system. Mrs. Evelyn's sharp tone laced with frustration. "Mr. Whitmore, this can't go on. Those children need discipline, not some wide-eyed girls thinking lullabies will solve everything." "They don't need boarding school," Daniel's voice responded, tired but firm. "They need someone who's really here." Sophie paused mid-wipe. She knew better than to eavesdrop, but sometimes truth only revealed itself in unguarded moments. Her grandmother used to say, "In rich houses, the walls have ears. In poor houses, the ears have walls." In this place, it felt like everything had eyes, too. She set the cloth down. Her heart beat faster. A thought surfaced, reckless, wild, but suddenly impossible to ignore. Wiping her hands on her apron, Sophie stepped out of the kitchen and walked into the main hall where Evelyn and Daniel stood mid-discussion. "Excuse me for interrupting," she said, voice soft but steady. "But if you'd allow it, I'd like to try caring for the children." Both heads turned, looking at her as if the vacuum cleaner had just asked to run the household. "She's the cleaning girl," Evelyn snapped with a dry chuckle. "Surely you jest, sir." But Daniel didn't laugh. He studied Sophie closely. Her eyes weren't naive. They were determined. "You have experience with kids?" he asked. "I have 5 younger siblings. I helped raise them while my parents worked night shifts," Sophie answered, her voice trembling slightly, but her gaze never wavering. "They don't need another person barking orders," she continued. "They need someone who listens. They're not difficult. They're lonely." Daniel inhaled deeply. A hush fell over the grand hall. Then, quietly, he nodded. "All right, 2 weeks. Trial period." "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down," she replied, offering a small, tentative smile, the kind born not from confidence, but from hope that maybe, just maybe, her heart was finally leading her somewhere she belonged. The next morning, Sophie arrived earlier than usual. She no longer wore her housekeeping uniform, but instead chose a pair of dark jeans, a simple white blouse, and tied her hair back in a low bun. No one had asked her to change, but she needed this shift for the children and for herself. When she opened the door to the playroom, chaos greeted her like a gust of wind. Toys were everywhere, pillows on the floor, shirts hanging from lamps, and in the middle of it all were 6 screaming toddlers, Daniel's sextuplets in full meltdown mode. Sophie didn't yell, she didn't bark orders. She just took a deep breath, stepped into the storm, and knelt down to their level. "Good morning, little ones," she said softly but clearly. "Looks like someone's got a serious case of the hungry bellies, huh?" The wailing paused, just a bit, but enough for one of them, Ethan, the boldest, to peek up at her. Sophie smiled and began humming a lullaby her mother used to sing. Only this time she changed the words into a silly breakfast tune. "Wakey, wakey, sleepy head, time to eat some jam and bread." The sniffles turned into giggles. Within minutes, all 6, Ethan, Olivia, Max, Chris, Lily, and Ben, had circled around her, curious eyes and wary smiles. Without pushing, Sophie stood and offered her hand. "Who wants to help me make peanut butter toast?" Tiny hands reached out. All 6 followed her downstairs. For the first time in months, no screaming, no tantrums. The days that followed were nothing short of magical. Sophie had a gift. She could weave play into every routine. To the children, brushing teeth meant winning sparkling crowns, cleaning up turned into a treasure hunt for hidden gems, and bath time was nothing less than an adventure on Bubble Planet. Daniel watched from a distance, at first with skepticism, then with curiosity. But slowly he began to smile, a real unguarded smile, every time he heard his children's laughter echo through the halls. One afternoon, he came home earlier than usual. Instead of silence, he was met with the sound of music and water splashing. He stepped into the backyard and froze. Sophie sat on the grass, soaked from head to toe, singing a nursery rhyme while the kids splashed in a green inflatable kiddie pool. She clapped to the rhythm, water flying everywhere, the children shrieking with joy. She didn't know he was there. But in that moment, Daniel didn't just see the woman who had helped him keep things from falling apart. He saw the light returning to a home he'd thought would stay dim forever. From the far end of the hallway, Mrs. Evelyn Grant quietly watched Sophie lead the children down to the kitchen without a single tear shed. For months she had seen nanny after nanny crumble in mere days. And yet, this young housemaid had somehow managed what trained professionals could not. A knot of unease coiled inside Evelyn. The entire household seemed to be shifting around Sophie now. The children's laughter, Daniel's softened gaze, all pointed to one thing. The young woman was becoming the heart of this home. And if Sophie continued to succeed, Evelyn knew her own authority, carefully held for decades, would soon be nothing more than a shadow in this grand estate. In the days that followed, the Whitmore estate seemed to wear a new face. Gone were the endless tantrums. In their place, laughter filled the halls. Daniel often stood at the upstairs balcony, watching quietly. He saw the children clustered around Sophie, eyes shining, voices giggling. He heard music drift through the air, her voice blending with theirs. Something warm rose in his chest, so unfamiliar it almost hurt. For months he had believed this house was a tomb of silence, but with Sophie it was breathing again. One sweltering afternoon, Daniel returned home early. Even before stepping inside, he heard splashing water and shrieks of laughter. He hurried to the backyard and froze. There was Sophie, hair dripping, t-shirt plastered to her skin, sitting on the grass beside a green inflatable kiddie pool. The children clapped and sang along as she splashed with them, sunlight bouncing off the water. When Ethan spotted him, the boy shouted, "Daddy! Daddy!" and ran barefoot, arms wide. For the first time in months, Daniel felt his son run toward him in pure joy. Sophie scrambled to her feet, embarrassed. "I'm so sorry. It was hot, and I thought—" "Don't apologize," Daniel cut in, voice rough with emotion. "This is perfect." In that moment, as laughter filled the fading light, Daniel realized his heart was stirring back to life. But Mrs. Evelyn Grant was not pleased. From an upstairs window, her face hardened. For years, she had been the one who ruled the rhythm of this house. Now the children's joy and Daniel's softened gaze all pointed to Sophie. What began as unease festered into resentment. Days later, Evelyn made her move. That morning, Sophie was preparing breakfast when Daniel called her into the parlor. The sight stopped her cold. Toys were scattered across the floor. Clothes lay ripped. And on the center table, like damning evidence, sat a photograph of a shattered Chinese heirloom vase. "You see?" Evelyn's voice was sharp, triumphant. "I warned you. She lets them run wild. This is the result. Family treasures destroyed." Daniel frowned and looked at Sophie. Her heart slammed against her ribs as if trying to break free. She opened her mouth. "I didn't. I swear." But the words tangled in her throat. How could she fight decades of Evelyn's authority with nothing but her trembling voice? The silence pressed down like stone. Daniel asked slowly, "Is this true, Sophie?" It wasn't. I didn't." Her voice faltered, caught in her throat. The coolness in his eyes cut deeper than any words. And then, small footsteps. The children stumbled in, hair tousled, still in pajamas. Ethan stepped forward, clutching his father's hand. "It wasn't Sophie!" Everyone stilled. Ethan's voice grew louder. "I saw it. Mrs. Evelyn broke the vase." Shock slammed into the room. Evelyn paled. "He's lying. They're children. They don't know what they saw." But Olivia piped up, voice trembling yet firm. "I saw it too. She slipped. The vase fell. Then she told us to stay quiet." Max jumped in, eyes blazing. "She said if we told, she'd be mad, and she'd send Sophie away." Sophie gasped, tears flooding her eyes. Daniel's face hardened as he turned to Evelyn. "You dared lie to me? And worse, you forced my children to lie?" His voice thundered through the hall. "Daniel, I only wanted—" "Enough!" he roared. "You're finished here. Out of my house. Now!" Evelyn staggered, her face ashen, heels clattering furiously against the marble as she stormed out. Sophie stood trembling, tears slipping down her cheeks. Daniel stepped closer, his tone softening. "You don't have to say anything. I should have trusted you from the beginning." And in his eyes, Sophie finally saw what she had longed for all along: real trust. For the first time, she felt she truly belonged within these walls. After Evelyn's departure, the mansion felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. Laughter echoed in every room. Daniel seemed different too. He joined his children at breakfast more often, and sometimes lingered in the kitchen just to talk with Sophie. But just as things seemed to fall into a rhythm of joy, an unexpected phone call shattered Sophie's calm. That afternoon, while the children napped, her phone buzzed. On the line was a polite female voice. "Hello, is this Sophie Bennett? This is Marta Williams, Academic Director at Bright Futures Academy. We recently had a teaching position open up and found your application from 3 years ago. Are you still interested in teaching?" Sophie froze. Bright Futures Academy, the prestigious school she had once dreamed of teaching at before her family's hardships forced her to give it up. Her heart pounded. Yes, I am," she whispered. "Wonderful. Could you come for an interview tomorrow? The position begins next week." When the call ended, Sophie sank into a kitchen chair, joy mixed with anguish. This was the chance she had longed for, But it also meant leaving the mansion, leaving behind 6 children who had captured her heart. That evening, when Daniel returned, Sophie found the courage to speak. She stood in the kitchen, nervously twisting a towel in her hands. "Mr. Whitmore, I've been invited to interview at Bright Futures. It's the dream I once had to abandon." Daniel was silent for a moment. His heart clenched, but his face remained calm. "Congratulations, Sophie. You deserve that." The words, instead of comforting, cut deep. Part of her had hoped, foolishly, that he would ask her to stay. But Daniel, steady and composed, only offered a polite smile before walking away, leaving Sophie alone with the hollow ache in her chest. The next morning, as Sophie prepared to leave for the interview, the children noticed her change. Ethan looked up, wide-eyed. "Miss Sophie, why are you dressed different? Where are you going?" "I'm just going to an interview, little one," she said gently. "But you'll come back, right?" Olivia's voice trembled. Sophie knelt down, gathering them all into her arms. "I will always love you, no matter where I am." But the promise wasn't enough to stop their tears. All 6 children cried, clinging desperately to her sleeves, as though letting go would mean losing her forever. Daniel stood nearby, silent, his heart twisting painfully. He knew that if Sophie walked out, it wouldn't just be his loss. His children would lose the one person who had given them joy again. And yet, the words lodged in his throat. He couldn't bring himself to say what his heart was screaming, "Please stay." So Sophie walked out the door, leaving behind 6 sobbing children, and a man torn apart, paralyzed between duty and a love he had yet to name. The days following the call from Bright Futures Academy weighed heavily on the Whitmore mansion, like a storm quietly brewing. Sophie tried to keep the children's routine steady, but their worried eyes betrayed the truth. Each time she reached for the door, small hands clung to her sleeves, terrified she might disappear forever. Daniel watched it all in silence. His chest tightened with every sob from his children, yet he couldn't bring himself to say the words his heart longed for. "Please stay." At night, when the house lay in stillness, he sat alone in his study, the desk lamp casting weary shadows on his face, his mind circling the same tormenting thought. Was he about to lose the only woman who had brought warmth back into their home? Meanwhile, Sophie lay awake through sleepless nights, torn between the dream she had once sacrificed and the love she had unexpectedly found. Deep down, she knew where her heart leaned, but reason wrestled against reality. And just as silence and hesitation threatened to push them further apart, a new turn of fate was approaching, one that would force Daniel to make a choice, not only for himself, but for his family. The interview at Bright Futures Academy felt like a dream. The room was filled with light, walls decorated with children's art. Director Marta Williams greeted Sophie warmly and placed a contract on the table. "We've reviewed your file. Your talent, your dedication, and the sacrifices you've made for your family are exactly what we're looking for. If you agree, you can start next week." Sophie smiled faintly, though her heart was torn in two. This was the moment she had dreamed of, yet instead of joy, she felt a hollow ache. She nodded and signed, her hand trembling. In the days when Sophie was busy preparing for her interview, the Whitmore mansion felt unusually silent and hollow. Breakfast, once filled with laughter, was now marked only by the faint clink of spoons against bowls. The children sat around the table, eyes drifting toward the kitchen door, hoping to see Sophie's familiar figure appear. But the doorway remained empty. Ethan, the eldest, tried to be brave, yet his reddened eyes betrayed him. Olivia kept asking, "Daddy, why doesn't Miss Sophie tuck me in at night anymore?" Daniel could only bend down, pull her close, and swallow the ache in his throat. At night, without Sophie's presence, the house seemed to lose its breath. Small footsteps pattered toward his study, one child after another begging to sleep beside him. 6 little bodies crowded his bed, yet the empty space at his side remained painfully unfilled. He lay awake in the dark, listening to the steady breaths of his children, the weight of guilt pressing heavier with every moment. It wasn't just him. His children had grown so used to Sophie's gentle care that without her, their world began to crumble. Daniel clenched his fist tightly, realizing that his silence, his hesitation, was slowly breaking the family apart. That evening, Daniel received a call from his mother, Amelia Whitmore. Her voice was stern. "Daniel, you cannot hide forever. The Charity Foundation Gala is this weekend. I expect you to attend. There will be families of status present. You need a proper wife to raise those children. I've arranged for you to meet the Prescott girl. She's the perfect match." Daniel closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. He had lived his whole life bowing to expectations. But now, when he thought of Sophie, of the children's laughter, he no longer wanted to yield. "I'll attend," he said calmly, "but I'll bring someone of my own choosing." "Who?" "Sophie Bennett." The silence on the line was sharp. Amelia's voice cracked. "A housemaid? Daniel, you'll ruin this family's name." "No, Mother. I'll save my family." His hand shook as he hung up, but within him, certainty burned bright. The next day, Daniel found Sophie in the garden, helping the children plant sunflower seeds in clay pots. His chest tightened as he approached. "Sophie." She looked up, her blue eyes uncertain. "Mr. Whitmore?" He drew a deep breath. "There's a gala this weekend. Come with me." "As someone I cherish." Her eyes widened. "You want to present me? Before everyone?" "Yes, it's time I stopped hiding. I want them to know who you are to this family, and to me." Her gaze wavered, torn between fear and longing. "Daniel, I don't belong in that world." He took her hand gently. "You are my world." The night of the gala arrived. The hotel glittered like a palace, chandeliers raining light across the marble floors. When Daniel entered, holding Sophie's hand firmly, all heads turned. Sophie wore a simple navy gown, her hair pinned in a neat bun, her face alight with both fear and resolve. Whispers rose like a storm. "Who is she?" "I heard she used to be a maid." "Daniel Whitmore brought—" "Her?" Sophie heard it all. Each word stabbed deep, but Daniel never let go. Instead, he held tighter, guiding her straight into the heart of the ballroom. As the orchestra played a gentle waltz, Daniel turned to her. "They're watching. Are you afraid?" Her lips trembled into a smile. Terrified. "Then just look at me." They danced. Awkward at first, but slowly, she let herself follow his lead. Step by step, the whispers faded, replaced by the rhythm of their hearts. Then suddenly, Daniel stopped mid-step. The music faltered, the dancers around them stumbling to a halt as every eye turned their way. In the hush, Daniel sank to one knee on the polished marble floor. Gasps broke through the silence as he drew out a small velvet box, the diamond within catching the light like a star. "Sophie Bennett," his voice carried across the hushed room. "You brought laughter back to my children and life back to me. Will you marry me?" Sophie froze, breath caught. Hundreds of eyes pressed down on her. But when she looked into Daniel's gaze, steady, unyielding, her tears spilled and her answer broke free. "Yes." Applause thundered through the ballroom, some genuine, some reluctant. But Daniel and Sophie didn't care. He slid the ring onto her finger, pulled her up, and kissed her under the blazing chandeliers. That night, they did more than dance. They declared their hearts, openly, boldly, against the weight of society. And for Sophie, for the first time, she no longer felt like an outsider. She was part of the Whitmore family, and nothing could change that. After the dazzling gala, Charleston buzzed with whispers. Some were shocked, others disapproving, but for Daniel and Sophie, nothing mattered except that they had chosen each other. The next morning, as soft sunlight streamed into the garden, Sophie sat by the window, the new ring on her finger catching the light. She knew it was time to make her final decision about the job at Bright Futures Academy. She lifted the phone and dialed Director Marta Williams. Her voice trembled slightly, yet her words carried strength. "Mrs. Williams, I'm deeply grateful for the chance to teach at such a prestigious school. But I must decline. My dream is no longer just to stand in a classroom. I've found a family and a greater purpose." On the line, Marta paused before replying softly. "Miss Bennett, you are choosing the harder road. But sometimes it's the hard roads that lead to extraordinary things. I wish you the very best." When Sophie set down the phone, she exhaled deeply. For the first time in years, she felt not like someone chasing a dream, but someone stepping into her true calling. That afternoon, Daniel found Sophie in the garden with the 6 children. Each of them held a small clay pot, inside which tiny green shoots were pushing through the soil. He sat beside her and asked quietly, "What are we planting?" Sophie smiled. "Hope. With soil, water, and love, every seed can grow." Daniel was silent for a moment, then reached for her hand. "You once dreamed of being a teacher. I want that dream to come true, not far away, but here in Charleston. I want us to open a school together, a place where children from every background can learn and thrive." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Do you really think we could do that?" Daniel's smile was steady, reassuring. "I don't just think it, I believe it, and I want to do it with you." A year later, an old mansion had been restored, and above its iron gates gleamed 3 words, "The Garden of Hope." On opening day, the courtyard rang with the laughter of dozens of children. Some wore polished uniforms from wealthy homes, others came in worn shoes, and a few were orphans with tuition fully covered. But side by side, none of that mattered. What united them was curiosity, joy, and the chance to belong. Sophie stood on the stage, her eyes glowing with pride as her voice carried warmly. "Here, each of you is a precious seed. With knowledge and love, you will grow and blossom. This is more than a school. It is a garden of hope." Below the stage, Daniel stood with the 6 children clustered around him. Ethan leaned up and whispered, "Daddy, is Miss Sophie the principal now?" Daniel bent down, smiling. "Yes, son, she's the heart of this school." The children's faces lit with joy, their pride in Sophie shining as bright as the morning sun. As the months passed, the Garden of Hope became a point of pride in Charleston. Sophie led as academic director, while Daniel provided the support and vision behind the scenes. The 6 Whitmore children flourished in this environment of love, learning not only academics, but also that a person's worth is not defined by where they come from, but by the kindness they give. One late afternoon, Sophie stood on the school porch beside Daniel, watching their children laugh and play with classmates from every walk of life. Leaning into his shoulder, she whispered, "See, Daniel, we didn't just find happiness for ourselves. We planted it for so many others." Daniel wrapped his arm around her, his smile radiant. "You're right. This is our fairy tale, and the best part, it's real." As time passed, the Garden of Hope became more than a school. It became the beating heart of a unique family. Daniel and Sophie were not just founders, but true companions, guiding each other through every challenge. The 6 children grew healthy and joyful, living proof that love could mend even the deepest wounds. Every afternoon, as laughter echoed across the schoolyard, Daniel often found himself watching Sophie quietly, his eyes filled with gratitude and a love that only deepened with time. He knew the moment had come to show her, and the world, that they were no longer just partners, no longer just 2 people bound by circumstance, but a real family. And for Sophie, in every smile, in every hand held tightly by the children, she felt her happiness was already whole. Yet there remained one final step to seal it forever. And so, in the very garden where love had first taken root, a new beginning awaited them. Their wedding day dawned on a radiant spring morning, sunlight spilling over Charleston's blooming gardens. Yet the ceremony did not take place in a grand cathedral or a lavish ballroom, but in the humble garden behind the Garden of Hope, the very spot where Sophie once sat, teaching the children to plant their first sunflower seeds. It was the ground that had witnessed the beginning of everything: sorrow, hope, and the first stirrings of love. Rows of white chairs lined the flower-strewn path. The 6 children darted about, brimming with excitement. Ethan and Olivia held hands, tossing petals into the air, while Max, Chris, Lily, and Ben took turns running up to hug Sophie, then dashing back to Daniel. They knew this day wasn't just about watching, it was about them too, the final piece that made their family whole. Sophie appeared in a simple ivory gown, her hair gathered low with a sprig of lavender. No diamonds, no crown, yet her smile outshone any jewel. Daniel waited at the end of the aisle, his heart pounding as fiercely as the first day he had seen her in the kitchen with his children. When the vows were spoken, tears glistened in every eye. Daniel's voice shook with emotion, but each word rang steady. "I vow to choose you every day, today and always. You brought laughter back to my children and to me. You are home." Sophie's tears fell, but her smile was radiant. "I vow to love you and the children with all that I am. I once thought happiness was a distant dream, but you and the children have shown me it is simply having someone to love and being loved in return." Applause thundered as they exchanged rings. The 6 children leapt up with cheers, wrapping their arms around both of them. "Now we're a real family," Olivia cried, sending ripples of laughter through the guests' tears. The reception was held right there in the schoolyard. The sunflowers planted a year earlier stretched tall and golden, silent witnesses to a journey from struggle to fulfillment. Students, parents, friends, even former skeptics smiled warmly as they watched a family not defined by society's perfection, but by its authenticity. The Garden of Hope grew to be more than a school. It became a symbol of love, fairness, and belief that every child deserved a chance. Local newspapers wrote, "This is the school where simple love changed an entire community." Didn't he? But for Sophie and Daniel, the truest reward was seeing children each morning racing through the gates, laughter filling the hallways, proof that their dream had blossomed. That night, after the last guest had gone, Sophie and Daniel sat together in the garden under the moonlight. The 6 children slept peacefully in the nearby room. Sophie leaned against his shoulder and whispered, "See? We never needed castles or titles. True happiness is just having a place filled with love and someone who sees your worth." Daniel held her close, his voice gentle but resolute. "And I will choose you, Sophie, every day for the rest of my life." From that day forward, their story lived on as proof of one timeless truth. True happiness has never been found in castles or crowns, but in the quiet courage of 2 hearts choosing each other, over doubts, over fear, every single day.